Welcome to 5 Pillar Fitness. This is Daniel Jacobson, and we are helping aspiring humans to live life with passion. That's the whole principle of this podcast. Now, the whole theory behind it comes from a Buddhist teaching. Buddha originally taught that life is suffering. Now, I thought about that, and I wanted to completely change that, completely alter it. Instead of thinking that life is suffering, I looked at the root of the word suffer, and it means passion. Now that can be related to the passion of Christ, okay, the suffering of Christ. They're one and the same. So instead of thinking that life is all about suffering, life is actually all about finding your passion, finding about what you're grateful for and what you really truly want out of life. So the foundation of passion, I believe, begins with 5 pillars. These all have to do with your fitness because your physical body is going to be the most important key to finding your passion. The 5 pillars are diet, sleep, exercise, your mindset, having a good mindset, and then last but not least, healthy relationships. Okay, these are the 5 pillars. Now, this is something that I've been working on a very long time, and I ended up getting my degree in psychology, and this whole path actually started for me way back when I was in 9th grade. I had just transferred schools. I didn't know anybody. I was pretty lonely, and somehow, some way, for some reason, I was able to get into a lot of advanced classes, even though I'm not naturally smart or naturally gifted or talented at anything. I ended up getting into AP classes and honors classes, and basically, I was way over my head. I couldn't do it. I was playing football at the time, and it was just way too much on my plate. My day would start, I would get up at 4 a.m., and I'd have to get a ride with one of my coaches to be able to go to school because it was a half-hour drive. I'd have to get to school really early. I'd get an early morning lift with him. I'd go to an early morning class, seminary, and I'd walk to the middle school after that. Once I got done with middle school, I would literally walk back to school and have football practice. And then my dad was one of my coaches, and so he had meetings after practice. So I would just have to sit there in the locker room waiting for another hour after everybody had already left and gone home. After that, I'd go home and I'd have a couple hours of homework because, again, I was in way over my head. I just couldn't do it. And it just became all way too overwhelming. I couldn't handle it anymore. And one night it was like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and I just broke down. I started to cry. And I couldn't handle it. I didn't know how I was going to be able to accomplish all these things that I wanted to do with my life, mainly just be a good football player, but then everything else. And as I was crying, my little brother came into the room, and he was in shock. You know, I'm big older brother. I'm not supposed to be crying. And he didn't say anything. He was in shock. He ended up going upstairs, grabbing my dad and saying, I don't know what to do. Daniel's crying. I don't know what's wrong with him. And my dad comes downstairs into the room. We're all humans. We're all learning here. He doesn't know what he's supposed to do in the situation. Here I am, a 12-year-old kid crying over my homework. He just looks at me. And this sentence has changed the rest of my life, and it has been a foundation for who I am. He looks at me and he says, what are you willing to sacrifice? I was confused at first. He sits down on my bed and he says, what are you willing to sacrifice to be great? What are you willing to put on the line where your priority is going to be? And he hugged me, he embraced me, and then we had a little bit of a conversation. You know, in life, you can't do everything. You can't have everything perfect. There's a give and take, there's balancing, there's priorities that you have to have in your life. And so he said, what do you want your priorities to be? Do you want God to be a priority? Do you want school, football, friends, sleep, all the different things that we can do with our life? Like, what do you want your priority to be? What are you willing to sacrifice in order to make those priorities? And with that, I came up with my first 5 pillars in my high school 5 pillars, which was FFSFS. And it stood for faith, family, school, football, social. And 1 to 5, that was the order of my priorities. Number 1 was always, first and foremost, my relationship with God and my faith in Jesus Christ. And then came family. If it was a toss-up between hanging out with friends or staying with my family and cultivating relationships with my brothers, with my grandparents, with people that I'm actually going to be with for a long time, I would prioritize that. With school had to come first. I had to learn. I had to educate myself. And then with football, I had to work out. I had to take care of my body. And this is really where the word priorities became super, super vital in my life, and where it's ended up developing into 5 Pillar Fitness. Now, eventually down the road, after you get your foundations, you can build and get more priorities and more things going into your life, but that was the start for me. Now, on that journey, I ended up, like I said, going to school, and I got my degree in psychology, marriage, family, and human relations, and exercise physiology. Now, the original goal with this is to become a sports psychologist, to work with athletes, to work with people that are under high pressure situations to be able to perform well. Now, what it's turned into is I see a big problem in the world. We aren't living fulfilled lives. We aren't living up to our potential. We're stuck in little rabbit holes, and we can't quite get to where we want to be. And the book that I love that taught me this principle is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Now, Man's Search for Meaning, if you don't know about Viktor Frankl, he was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was a Jew during the Holocaust. And the only difference between those that survived and those that didn't survive, Victor shares, is that the ones that survived had purpose. That was it. That was the only difference. So in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, your entire meaning in life is to find purpose, is to find what you are put here on earth to do. Now, that is exactly where these 5 pillars come in. Now, to break down a little bit more of the psychology for you, a famous psychologist, Abraham Maslow, came up with the hierarchy of needs. It's a little pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid, you have safety and security in your home. And then the next step you can go and, you do extracurricular activities and have fun with friends and do things. And then at the top is self-actualization. Now, we'll get more into that later into the podcast, but at the base, you need to have a solid foundation first before you can move on to the next base of the pyramid. You have to have a good foundation first. And that is exactly what 5 Pillar Fitness is. It is the foundation in order to prioritize yourself so that you can have your base needs met to then eventually level up later in life. To sum up, the 5 pillars of fitness are diet, having a good, healthy diet. Sleep, making sure that you're getting adequate quality sleep. It's not always about quantity, it's about quality. Exercise, getting up, moving your body, doing something, getting your steps in, lifting heavy weights, however you want to exercise, having a good mindset, knowing that you're resilient, that you have a good mindset. And then 5, having good relationships, a good social life, whether that be with friends, family, especially with yourself. Okay? Now remember, I love you. And this has been 5 Pillar Fitness with Daniel Jacobson.